Good evening and welcome to Ohio Varsity Insider. I am Steve Hare, and joining me tonight is University of Cincinnati Assistant Athletic Director for Athletic Communications, Mollie Radzinski, who is also a fellow Golden Flash. So a double welcome to you, Mollie. Thank you for joining me tonight. How are things going in Cincinnati?
Yeah, thank you. It's great. Kind of the same as everywhere. Just hunkered down, trying to, work through this crazy time.
Yeah, obviously I have you on for an initiative that we're kind of driving, just empowering women through sport and introducing the high school athlete to some of the career paths that are available to them. And so your path into athletic communications is a little bit different than most. You weren't the high school athlete, you weren't a college athlete. How did you get involved in sports?
Sure. Everyone always asks me, were you a high school athlete? And my answer is always no, which kind of surprises people because most athletes are the ones who go into work in sports. But I danced. I wasn't, I was always around sports because I had an older brother and my dad was an athlete. So I was always tagging along to his practices and games. And and then in high school, my dad taught me how to keep book for baseball, how to score keep. And so my junior and senior year of high school, we were good friends with the head varsity coach. So I traveled with the baseball team and was at all the games on the bench. And I did their scorebook, which back then was, the big actual, binded book with pencil. And so then I went to Kent State. I wanted to be a sideline reporter. It took me a while to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And then I kind of just had a light bulb moment. I was like, I love sports and I'm pretty outgoing. Like, I want to be the people on the sidelines, like at these games, asking the questions. So I found Kent State and I went there and majored in broadcast journalism. And when I was that fall, when I stepped on campus, I reached out to the head baseball coach at the time, was Scott Strickland, and was like, hey, do you need any help? I took, book in high school, which to this day, now that I've worked so long in sports, I can't believe he actually answered me back, but he did. So I kind of started working with the team at Kent State. And then from that, I got to know everyone in the Athletic Communications office. And then I started working for them. So I started working baseball and football and all the other sports. And then I needed to do internships in the summer. And I was back home in New York. And there's a small little New York Penn League team there that my friend was interning for the summer. She said, hey, you should come work here. And I went, and that internship started 1 week. The first week was doing sales calls. And then I think that was the only week I ever touched a phone. And from there, I was writing recaps. I was on the MLB site, like their MILB site. I was doing their recaps. I was doing their web updates. I was on-field MC, running the promotions, working with sponsors. I was helping coordinate player appearances. I was doing video pieces for the team and for a local online newspaper in the little city. So it kind of just developed from there, and I did that for 2 years because I just really enjoyed it. And then it came time for graduation from Kent State, and I realized that I didn't want to be a journalist. I didn't want to be the person that was asking all the questions. I liked my experience being with the team and being on the inside. So I applied, instead of applying to a bunch of news stations, I applied to a bunch of minor league baseball teams. So I worked in the minors for a few years, like season-long internships and then a full-time position, doing promotions, community relations, that sort of stuff. And then I was in between jobs, and Coach Strickland actually kind of reached out through the Athletic Communications office back at Kent State and said, hey, we need a baseball SID. Do you want to come back full-time? And I was like, all right, I guess so. So I went back and I was an SID at Kent State for 5 years. And then I had an opportunity at the University of Cincinnati, thanks to a women's basketball assistant coach that I worked with at Kent had moved on to Cincinnati. And I was just kind of that time that, I felt I needed to move up and move on. And so I've been at Cincinnati now three years. So I started as an associate director, and then I was promoted this past August to assistant athletic director. So it's been kind of all over the place, but that's how I ended up where I am.
You touched on a lot of the things that an athletic communications employee works on every day. You could be keeping stats at a volleyball game to writing the recaps to doing player bios. What are some of your favorite parts of the job?
Sure. Yeah. We kind of are a jack of all trades. We kind of laugh in our office that, since we're around the coaches and the team so much, sometimes we get all those commands. So it can be 10 minutes before a volleyball tip off and the coach is asking me about the lighting, if the lighting's correct in the arena and why, and then the girls are asking me about the music. Two things I have nothing to do with, but always seem to fall on our shoulders. But I think my the favorite role I think I have is working with, whether it's outside media or our internal, video or even just me, is just writing the stories, more of the feature pieces on our student athletes. That's what really makes me come back every day, is being able to tell those stories. For example, I had a swimmer this year who was a senior in October. She just started not feeling well, and long story short, she had thyroid cancer and ended up going through chemo and 2 surgeries and came back and swam at senior day, which was just amazing. And she was open to us sitting down and telling her story and, just getting those things out there. And then a few months later, another girl in the conference went through the same thing. So it's just kind of nice being able to reach out and say, hey, here's a story from our swimmer that went through the same exact thing. And just, they're so unique, and every student athlete is so different. So I just love being able to, whether it's me directly or, someone else in our department or, a media member in the community, being able to tell the student athlete stories is just really cool. And then I also love social media. I mean, that's kind of a new thing. When I was starting way back at Kent State, it didn't exist. We were still faxing in box scores and answering phones on press row. So times have changed, and now social media has totally took over. That's like our number one way to get, word out now. But you can have a lot of fun with it. I love during, with baseball especially, I feel like I can be really fun and have little, your own like home run calls via Twitter and all that good stuff. So I really enjoy, probably those 2 parts are my favorites.
Right. I know when I was covering Kent State, you have to work so closely with the athletic communications people because they're the ones that give you those stories about the swimmers and things like that. So it's a very important role. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face? I mean, obviously, you're coordinating multiple sports at Cincinnati. Also, as the assistant athletic director, you have administrative duties. And so how do you, put together all those challenges, manage your time and duties?
Sure. I think you hit it, was just, there's so many things to handle. When I was at Kent State, I think I had 4 or 5 teams at one point. Right now, I have 4 teams that I oversee. So I think the hardest thing is there is so much work and we do have so many duties. So it's really hard. Sometimes it's really hard to find the time to do those feature stories. I wish I could do more storytelling and, more the fun stuff, but it's, all the regular stuff that you have to get done kind of gets in the way. So you're spread kind of thin and you can't really sometimes delve in as deep to things you really want to touch on. So that's kind of tough, but it does help having, a department that, you can try to, help support that and help you get those stories out there. But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there is no off season for any team. Everyone says, oh, well, in the spring you just have baseball. It's like, well, first of all, baseball plays 4 or 5 games a week, including every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from February till Memorial Day. Hopefully you're going into June. And, it's crazy. And you just never know. I mean, the schedule it's exciting and you wouldn't want it to be any other way, but the scheduling and the time commitment is intense. I mean, when your teams are good, it's all you want. You want to keep winning and you want to see them happy, but it's crazy. I mean, last spring, our baseball team went to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 45 years. We hadn't won a game in a conference tournament. We had go 0 for 17, like in our last tournament games. We swept through the tournament, won the final game 22-5. So, I mean, just blistered our way through. And here we are being shipped out to Oregon. I had a wedding that weekend, so I missed it back in Kent, actually. Shout out to Mike McKee. And, so I had a wedding back in Kent with my friends, and I had to miss their wedding, which was the toughest thing on earth. But, you just never in a million years, you think you were going to, be in Oregon that weekend. And then this past winter, my volleyball team, we made it to the Sweet 16. It was the first time we had made it that far. We knocked off Pitt, who crushed us earlier in the season. They're the number 2 team in the nation, number 6 seed in their home gym, and we beat them. And it was the weekend before Christmas. I had plans to go to a play and do Christmas shopping because I hadn't had a chance yet. And here we are. We're shipped off to California. So, like I said, those parts are awesome, but it's tough. It's, that work-life balance is really tough.
Yeah, that's the sports field in general. You're working evenings and weekends. You sacrifice a lot, but the trade-off is worth it when you talk about those runs. And Kent State's run to the Elite Eight several years ago, and
Yes.
There's a lot of the excitement with the baseball team going to the College World Series. So you touched on it. It's hard. You have to give up a lot, but the sacrifice is worth it. So your path through to your position is kind of unorthodox, as you said. Mostly it's the athletic, the people that played sports that continued on. And so what kind of career advice could you give to somebody that might be interested or are already looking at a job in athletic communications?
Sure. Well, first thing I always tell people, if they're not sure, if they know they want to work in sports, but not sure maybe what department, I don't think a lot of kids, I certainly had no idea the amount of different areas that exist in athletics alone. If you're interested in business and finance, in operations, in compliance, in, obviously trainers and medical, staff. We have, the strength and conditioning, there's communications, there's marketing. There are so many different functions within athletics. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like, a lot of people don't realize that our jobs exist. So I think first and foremost, I always say, go shadow an athletic department for a few days. And, people, when I go talk to college classes or talk to high schoolers, I always offer people to shadow me. I have had, I think, 3 or 4 people shadow me, just this, year before the coronavirus hit. And it's just a good way to kind of see what we really do. Sometimes it's hard to explain and hard to hit on everything. So it's like, hey, come to this game day, come follow me around. I'll explain what we do. Just kind of shadow me for the day. I think that's the best way to kind of see. And I don't know any people in the industry that aren't willing to help, that if you reach out, be like, yes, absolutely. So, that's always, the first way to kind of make sure you are truly interested. And then I think the other thing is just don't get discouraged. Sports world is it's hard. There's a lot of people that want to do it. And, it's not for everyone. It's a lot of hours. It's a very big time commitment. It's, you miss holidays, you miss weekends, you miss weddings, you miss funerals, you miss all that stuff. So just make sure, it is something you truly want to do. And just, you have to be very organized. That's one big thing, because when you're moving in a million directions and you have 4 teams that you're shuffling around, just be very organized. And ironically, as funny as it sounds, but one thing that I think SIDs like myself and our department struggle with the most is communication. It's in our title, but it's the utmost important thing, and that's how you build trust and respect with your coaches, with your teams, with the other people in your department, is you communicate and over communicate. And, I know coaches appreciate that. They want to know what's going on. They want to know what you're doing. And sometimes if they're more a hands-off approach, it's better to just be like, hey, she knows what she's doing, let her do her thing. And it's just a relief to them to know that you're on top of it. But just communication is so huge. And don't be afraid, to be out there and get to know your coaches, get to know your student athletes. It's so much easier to go to a student athlete and say, hey, would you mind talking about this on camera? Or, hey, would you mind doing this interview, if they know you, if they have some sort of relationship with you. If you're a person that just kind of shows up every now and then, they recognize you but don't really know who you are, it's a lot more difficult for that person to be comfortable and to do the things that help you, which in the long run help their program. So it's just, communicate and be around, be a face, and and just stay organized. That's huge.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining me tonight, Mollie. I appreciated your work when I was at Kent State, and I'm glad you're still doing great things down there at the University of Cincinnati. And I hope some girls learn some things about athletic communications that might help them in preparing for a future in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me anytime. And, anyone out there that has any questions, my email is public. It's right on our website. I'm open to, anyone who's interested more. And I'm glad to share my story and hope to inspire.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good night.